to a meal plan for eternity, I honestly don't think that 99.99999% of people can do that. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Truth Talks, the podcast that brings you real strategies for sustainable fitness transformation. I'm Courtney, and this is my co-host and brother, Paris. And today we are diving into one of the key icons of fitness nutrition, meal plans. When you've been on your fitness trajectory for a while, I feel like it's just very common to say, like, yeah, I've done a meal plan at some point. Have you?
I think so. But I think nowadays, as people get more and more educated, maybe they haven't. But definitely more old school for sure.
Yeah. I guess it's more of a legacy then.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just older than some of the newer folks in the fitness
No.
realm. But, you know, I did a meal plan at some point, and it taught me a lot about the merits and drawbacks of meal plans. But today we're going to answer the question, are meal plans the best way to lose weight? So we're specifically talking about weight loss, fat loss applications for meal plans. But I do think it's important to recognize that some of the things we're going to touch on are just true no matter what your fitness goals are.
Yeah.
So we're going to anchor in that first and foremost of like, okay, the context today is definitely physique oriented, but at the end of the day, it's kind of the same no matter what, because we're all people, all pursuing long-term goals.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I like it.
Amazing. Before we dive into answering the question, which we actually have a very clear answer for, I'm going to ask you straight up, Paris, in a second. Mm-hmm. But I do think that we really need to recognize probably the number one detail that is overlooked by the fitness industry when it comes to meal plans. And that is that in the US and Canada, so North America, and probably in other places in the world, I just haven't gone down the rabbit hole to understand the logistics there. In North America, only registered dietitians can legally prescribe meal plans. Let me say that one more time. Only registered dietitians can legally prescribe meal plans. So all of those fitness coaches on social media being like, $99 meal plan, probably are not legally allowed to sell that to you.
Yeah, that is true. And also anybody that has that as their like service offering, of course, you know, you're not going to see results. It's just obvious. But anyways, like sometimes clients will ask though, like, you know, I have a meal plan? What we phrase it as, we'll give you a sample day of eating, what a day of eating might look like or could look like to hit your nutritional ranges or nutritional targets, but it's not prescribing a meal plan. And there's a difference.
There is a difference.
A reference point.
Yes.
And an example. Yeah.
There is a difference. So we're going to make that clear. And we'll come back to that point in terms of like what you can do instead of meal plans. Right off the top, registered dietitians are the ones who can prescribe meal plans. And that's because when it comes to like clinical therapeutic nutrition, so either to address specific medical needs or deficiencies or sports related priorities at a high level, right? Those sorts of things like do require a dietitian's background, because we then start to talk about the minutia of nutrition. But today we're talking about fitness goals, specifically physique goals and long-term fitness goals. I had to get that kind of disclaimer out of the way and saying when it comes to fitness coaches out there should not be leading with meal plans as their core offering. Let's answer the question.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to say before we just answer the question?
No, let's do it.
Because I'm sure there's so many people out there being like, I clicked on this video or I'm listening to this podcast because I want to know the answer. Let's give it to them. Paris, are meal plans the best way to lose weight?
No. Meal plans are not the best way to lose weight or lose fat, or even, I would argue, just see fitness progress in general with your physique. And the thing is, there is no best way. Like anybody that says there's a best diet or best workout program or best way to do XYZ, it's not true, because we're missing individuality and we're missing context and we're missing preference. And all those are very important.
So there is no objective best when it comes to anything diet related, period. It just doesn't exist. What works for somebody does not work for someone else, like you said, because of preference, individuality, all of those things are at the core. So before we even are answering our question, are meal plans the best way to lose weight? Is there any best way to lose weight? No. Let's now explore, though, why meal plans are also not the best. And so you said no. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to unpack what the challenges with meal plans are. But first, we're going to actually say, can they give results? When it comes to losing weight, do they actually achieve results for fat loss? We're going to start there. And then we're going to explain a little bit about where the challenges lie from a practical perspective and why not only can that inhibit weight loss or fat loss progress, but it can also inhibit long-term success on your fitness goals, whether that's weight maintenance down the road, continued weight loss or fat loss, or even things like muscle building or performance goals or any sort of nutrition adherence.
Like it. This is going to be good.
I think so too. Okay, before we dive into whether or not meal plans work, why do people even gravitate towards meal plans? Because there's a reason they have this legacy. Can we just get that off the table first?
Yeah, it is the mindset of just tell me what to eat. I don't care. I just want to know, like, tell me exactly what to do it and I'll do it to make progress. Like it's that kind of mindset. It's like, I don't know what to do. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Yeah.
There's no decision fatigue. When you have something written out in front of you and being like, oh, this is what I got to eat, cool. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to do any mental calculations. You don't have to do any creative meal planning. Like any learning. Yeah. We'll get more on that later. You don't have to learn anything. You don't have to put in the effort rehearsing and practicing and trial and error and all that. You just do it. There's a reason why Nike has the catch line, just do it, and why fitness people repeat that all the time, because that's what we like to hear. Execution. There's no results without execution, so we can't deny that. However, the same reasons why people gravitate towards meal plans, they're easy, they don't require thinking, there's no decision fatigue, there's consistency, just do the same thing every day. Mm-hmm. Those are great attractions of meal plans. Those are the magnetic aspects. But they're also the same reasons why people don't find success with meal plans. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we're going to come back to that, and we're going to talk about why meal plans could be hindering your success. But before we do, let's just dive into whether or not they actually do work.
I think in a short-term time frame, we can talk about kind of a reference point for this you can get into. Mm-hmm. But I do think, anecdotally, on a short-term time frame, they can work. As long as they're set up in a way where your nutrition targets are set in a logical manner that's right for you, like, they will work for that reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a properly designed meal plan does get results. And just to repeat, our definition of results here is weight loss, fat loss, right? In a short time frame. That's what we're talking about. Let's unpack that a little bit. And how do we know that they work? There was actually a study done in Bill Campbell's lab. They do a lot of great work around physique sport and resistance training and, diet strategies. And the study itself was led by a woman named Lauren Conlon. She's fantastic. I highly advocate people follow her work. She's got a great coaching approach, but it's rooted in academics and research. I really love this study because what they looked at was flexible versus rigid dieting. So flexible dieting meaning, you have specific calorie and, macro targets to hit, but you can hit them in any way you want, essentially. So food variety or picking whatever foods fit. Versus rigid dieting is what we think of as more like a meal plan, where you have specific foods in specific quantities that you are given to consume. And this study looked specifically at those two methods, flexible versus rigid dieting, in people who had a resistance training background. So they were gym goers or lifters, and they wanted physique outcomes. So that was the measure of results in this case. It was body weight, fat mass, and body fat percentage. What was interesting about this study was they gave those two groups, flexible dieting group and the rigid dieting group, 10 weeks at a calorie deficit. So both groups were at a 20% calorie deficit, which we know any weight loss method, any fat loss method needs a calorie deficit. So that was adhered to.
I hope we know that.
I hope we know that. If you're new to this podcast, now you know that. If you've been listening, you definitely know that already. Yeah. So both groups had that calorie deficit maintained. It was just achieved through those two different ways, either the flexible dieting or the rigid dieting. And after 10 weeks, both groups saw equivalent results when it came to changes in body weight, fat mass, and body fat percentage. Both groups saw equivalent results, which means that neither the flexible dieting or the rigid meal structure was superior in getting those outcomes. Do you have thoughts on that before I continue?
Yeah, I mean, it goes kind of along with what I was saying. It's like, if they're properly set up, we got the same numbers hit here and the same numbers hit there. It's like, okay, it makes sense that if you do it, it's going to lead to similar results.
Exactly. So I think the takeaway from that study is really that both methods work. Both methods work. And in this study, those diets were 10 weeks long, and then the participants were monitored for another 10 weeks. And there was like a small change in fat-free mass after 10 weeks with the flexible dieting group. So that could be like muscle retention or stuff, but the results weren't significant to draw any conclusions. So with that aside, the actual outcomes were very similar within the total 20 weeks of the study, the 10 where they were dieting and the 10 where they were monitored after. Okay.
Gotcha.
So if we just look at that time period, we could say, hey, meal plans work, flexible dieting works. So if we go back to our question, are meal plans the best way to lose weight? No, they're not the best, which we've already clarified. But flexible dieting and meal plans don't give any different outcomes in that short term. In this case, though, again, keeping in mind, these were people who had a background in resistance training and were probably more likely to have some diet knowledge and experience already, right? So these are people who aren't coming in fresh to flexible dieting or fresh to meal plan structures. They have some experience. If this study was done amongst like beginners or people who were new to fat loss or didn't have experience flexible dieting, it's possible the outcomes would have been different. But in that population, that's what we saw. Okay, so the reason I wanted to anchor in that study was just by saying, like, if we're talking about a comparison game, meal plans, flexible dieting, very same outcomes as long as the same calorie deficit is adhered to at the end of the day. So in the short term, you can get great results from both, which does not make meal plans or flexible dieting actually superior. Let's take it one step further, though. We're not into the short-term results game here.
Yeah.
I said this up front. I say it every episode. Sustainable fitness transformation. Sustainable fitness transformation, that long-term sustainability element. We're playing the long game. We don't just say, okay, we got a short-term number of weeks, we can lose the weight, cool, and then we move on. And the long-term success depends on long-term adherence. Now, I feel like I'm on a diatribe, but I'm going to say one more thing before we actually dive into things.
Go for it.
The number one predictor of long-term success, whether that's long-term weight loss or weight maintenance after weight loss, is dietary adherence. It's your ability to stick to your diet. So whether you're doing quote unquote a meal plan or rigid dieting or you're doing flexible dieting, you have to be able to stick with it.
Yeah, that's ultimately always going to be the biggest thing in the long run. As you highlighted, like there's a difference between what can give us results in short term and then what is going to continue giving us results over our kind of lifting career, we can call it, and our overall journey. And those are two very different discussions and very different questions.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think it's really important to highlight that. So when we answer the question that you said, like, what's the best diet for this, that, it's like the one that you can stick to that helps you consistently hit your targets in a balanced way for extended periods of time.
So if you're somebody who's listening to this going like, I can stick to a meal plan forever and ever and ever. Okay, good for you. I think you are the exception to the rule. I genuinely do think anybody who can stick to a meal plan, like for the indefinite foreseeable future.
Eternity, yeah.
For eternity, sticking to a meal plan for eternity, I honestly don't think that 99.99999% of people can do that.
Nor would that technically be most likely healthy in the long run, like psychologically. Like, let's just use me as an example. Let's say I was getting married, okay? And we have this nice dinner that we're going to plan, and everybody makes their speech. I'm sitting there, and then I take up my Tupperware
on your own wedding day.
Like my 150 grams of chicken, 200 grams of rice, and like 250 broccoli or something like that. Or you're on vacation, right? You're on vacation, and you're in a hotel. How are you going to all of a sudden be able to prep the exact meals, and you're going to never go out to dinner? It just doesn't make any sense. So even if you think you can do it, you can't. Yeah. You're not going to.
The practical realities of life are going to, at a certain point, inhibit you from being 100% adherent to a meal plan. That is the truth. Yeah. That is the truth. So our job today is to actually unpack those practical realities. We're going to now talk about the challenges of meal plans that actually not only don't make them the best method for weight loss, but actually make them less effective for weight loss or for long-term weight maintenance or any long-term fitness goal.
Yes.
All of this is predicated on what we talked about around short-term. They can still give the results when it comes to fat loss. We've shown that. We've seen it in the research. Now, when we go further than that, we need that long-term adherence to really drive results. Here are the practical challenges that get in the way of long-term adherence. And actually, some of these also make short-term adherence harder too, right? Like that study that showed that the outcomes were the same was 100% adherence during that time frame. Some of the things we're going to talk about as reasons why meal plans are not sustainable long-term also apply to the short term. So let's not forget that.
100%. Yeah. I think we're going to lift off quite a few important ones. And sometimes it's like the perceived benefits of the meal plans are also their downside, which you'll
Yes.
kind of see in this too, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So we'll touch on how to get best of both worlds. But I think the first one that comes to mind for me when I think about meal plans is like nutrient deficiencies. And again, we're not registered dietitians. That's not like our expertise. But if you think about it, let's say I only have the same five foods for like a year straight.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely going to be some gaps
Oh, yeah.
in the meal plan, and there is research to support that, especially during bodybuilding prep. Like people that do follow these kind of like 1980s type meal plans do get nutrient deficiencies,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which can have their own negative health outcomes on top of whatever you're going through in the competition prep. So it's pretty obvious, that is a possibility to happen.
If you want to cover all the vitamins and minerals your body needs, you have to eat a variety of food.
Yeah.
It's kind of that simple,
Yeah.
because different foods supply different vitamins and minerals and other nutrients. And if you're only eating the same foods over and over again, there's no way you can get the whole spectrum.
Full spectrum. Yeah.
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 So number one challenge, short term, okay. For a couple weeks, sure, yeah, we're fine. Bigger picture, right? Long term, some serious health consequences on the table. Yeah, potentially. That's number one. Do you want to go on with the next challenge?
Yeah, I think it's kind of what I mentioned before is life isn't just us living in this like perfect little bubble, right? We're going to be having times where we have events, we have family traditions, we have get-togethers, or we have travel when we're outside of our typical context. And I think it's important to realize that it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to successfully stick to a rigid meal plan when you're in those situations. So that's why it's so important for us to learn about nutrition and nutritional principles so that we are able to create our own structure, but still have the flexibility in those situations to still be successful in, we'll say, checking our boxes.
Absolutely. It's like whether it is going out to a restaurant, which, listen, you don't need to eat at a restaurant every day. We're not saying that. But there will be times when eating at a restaurant makes sense. And it doesn't mean that all of a sudden you have to make choices that are not aligned with your goals. You need to know how to eat at a restaurant, or how to go to your grandma's house and have dinner there, or how to get together with friends, or what happens if one day you're like super busy and you quote unquote skipped a meal on your meal plan. Like, it's not even about the foods you choose have to be different. It's like, what if the structure of your day changes?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is just bound to happen. Yeah. And so feeling confined with the meal plan structure essentially just makes your success binary. Your success becomes yes or no. I'm successful or I'm not. And it's completely dependent on my day-to-day routine, which, let's be honest, isn't always that day-to-day.
Yeah, it's going to change at some point.
Exactly. And I think the follow-up challenge in that is, like I said, binary. It starts to feel this like on versus off mentality, which is just the all or nothing mentality.
Yeah.
Meal plans, you're following it 100% or you're 100% off. And the reality is, just because you're not following a meal plan to a T doesn't actually mean you're 100% off with your nutrition goals.
No, it's like you either have this like perfect, quote unquote, perfect plan that you're following, or you're completely lost at what to do. Mm-hmm. And then there's no in between. And that's why we preach so much about learning about nutrition and learning the skills to operate in whatever context or environment you're in. Because like, yeah, what happens if you don't have that meal, right? What do? You're going to have a freak out session, right? And then all your progress is ruined. It's like, no, we need to learn how to operate when we don't have, that rigid structure. Mm-hmm. So it's not either we're in handcuffs in jail or we're running around all over the place. Like there's like two extremes that we need to avoid. Just like we always talk about that on or off mindset. It's so ingrained in people that are fitness focused, which is great because you can be on, but we always talk about being more of a dimmer switch, right? Where we adjust that as a sliding scale versus that on or off.
Yeah, exactly. And so finding like ways to win, I think it comes down to like finding ways to win when things aren't perfect. When that perfect structure doesn't exist, you can still find ways to win or be on track, whatever language you prefer. Meal plans I like that you said the handcuffs, because it does create these handcuffs for you where the only definition of success looks exactly what's on that sheet of paper.
Yeah.
And that's just not true. There are so many ways you can achieve the same outcome.
And, I've seen this a lot where people will have had success with certain meal plans that were very strict, and then they think that's like the only way that they can get back to that physique. Like, and
Right.
usually they have a very, very tough time, like post fat loss, these people, I find, because they ditch the meal plan, and you'll see like, whoa, what kind of happened? Not to be rude, but it's like the body comp like goes in the complete other direction very quickly, and then they're like, what the heck happened, right? Because they don't know how to eat without the meal plan. But
Oh,
then they go back to that meal plan, which they hate, but they think that's the only way I'm going to see progress. So I got to go back into that. Oh, this sucks, but I'm going to do it. And then they might give up because they can't stick to it again. They're like, why am I failing? It just
you
kind
know
of
what that
goes in
sounds
that
like?
cycle.
It's
What?
yo-yo dieting.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's yo-yo dieting. It's just proof that, like, you say this a lot, right? Did it actually work if you had that insane rebound? No.
Yeah.
So that's just
Yeah.
proof that the meal plan didn't work, because it didn't
Mm-hmm.
set you up for success, because you're falling back into that trap. You might have even been worse off post meal plan than you were pre meal plan.
Potentially, yeah.
Right?
Seriously.
Potentially. And I don't mean just in terms of physique, but because now, like you said, you've only defined, like, this is the only way I can execute control over my fitness goals.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as we said, that's limiting. That poses a limitation that's just not a realistic expectation of you. You should not put the expectation of yourself that you could follow that meal plan 100% all the time. It's not fair. I think what you're kind of also saying is, like, the challenge with the meal plans is you're not learning the skills.
Yes. Absolutely. That's the biggest, probably the biggest
The
thing.
biggest thing. Keep going
Yeah.
with it. Yeah, keep going
No,
with
I
it.
was just gonna say, it's like at some point you just have to get over that learning curve and like just make your way through that learning curve of like learning about macronutrients, learning about calories, learning about the content of your foods, learning like what nutrition ranges you need to hit for your body, whether you're building fat loss, maintenance, those kind of things, and learning how to then create some structure within your day to then hit those targets in a way that works for you and your lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the goal at hand. I'm very pro structure, okay, but I'm not pro meal plans. And
There's a
there's a
difference.
difference. Because listen, I eat very similar meals every day. Okay. I'll just say they're very similar meals at very similar times right now in this phase. However, I rotate a lot of my food sources. So I
Mm-hmm.
do have that structure, which gives me that consistency factor and gives me that predictability and removes the decision fatigue, the benefits of having a meal plan. But I also will rotate foods based on what I got from my groceries or what I want to eat or what my mom dropped off in my care package, like those types of things. And then also I'm getting the full spectrum of nutrients. Okay, I did a lot of blueberries this week. All right, let's rock some bananas and apples this week, those kind of things. So I have my plug and play structure, but then I'm also making these strategic swaps based on preference, variety sake, and like where life takes me.
And it's a road to get to the point where you're at, right? Like,
Yeah, this didn't
it's a
happen when I
journey.
first started
No,
tracking.
exactly. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of time. It takes conscious effort. It takes intention, and it takes trial and error. And some of that is, like, sometimes missing. Sometimes you got to miss, right? And I feel like with a meal plan, people are so focused on, like, I can't miss, because you're either entirely on or you're entirely off. So you're not even setting yourself up to learn. Like, you're not even focused on skills yet. You're not even learning, because when you're just executing, you're not questioning why things are the way they are. And for me, that's one of the biggest limitations with meal plans is, like, there's no questioning, hey, what is this actually doing? Why is this set up this way? What happens if this were to be this instead? Like you're saying, for swaps, right? That questioning period and that trial and error period is the learning that unlocks skill development.
Mm-hmm,
And you know
mm-hmm.
what comes with that? Once you've learned, once you got skills, you've put in the practice, you've built your strategies, you become more autonomous.
Yes.
The other challenge I really have with meal plans is, like, it breeds a dependency.
Yes.
And you said this earlier when you said about, like, competition prep people who, like, don't know how to eat after a meal plan and after prep. They're now dependent on that meal plan to
Mm-hmm.
maintain the physique that they want to have. I don't
Yes.
think that's a healthy dependency.
No, probably not. I will say, and maybe we'll talk about like use cases for
We
meal plans
will.
in a
We will
second.
talk about use cases for meal
But
plans in a
yeah, I
second.
don't think I don't
Yeah.
think you should be completely. And a lot of competitors are dependent on that meal plan, and then when they go to eat for dinner or whatever, like they just have a free for all because they just don't know what to do, and they're like, "Well, I guess we're just going all out tonight, right?" And they don't
They
see
call it a
food
cheat
as
meal,
like,
and then
yeah,
they move
yeah,
on.
exactly.
Check out our episode on what's the problem with cheat meals, because we got a whole diatribe on that too.
Yeah, exactly. But it's more so, again, you just don't learn and you don't know how to navigate other situations that are not your Tupperware meal that you. Yeah.
Right. I'm just going to reiterate, the challenge with meal plans in that sense is, without the skills development, you don't have the autonomy or even the self-efficacy, like the belief in the power that you can do it,
Mm-hmm.
in a different way and in a more sustainable way. So that definitely is one of the downsides there. I actually had this other note that I'm going to share here, which is like, just to continue with some of the practical challenges of meal plans, because this happened to me, right? It's like sometimes I'll do grocery delivery, and I know you do this a lot too, Paris, is like,
Oh yeah, every
grocery
week.
delivery, right? Because you're like, great, I get what I have, I know what's on my list this week, I'm gonna have it delivered. There have been times where my grocery delivery arrives and they're like, sorry, we were out of this, and they don't have a substitution, or they substitute with something totally different. I'm like, I didn't want that.
Yeah.
And so, could you imagine if I was following a strict meal plan
Hmm.
and they're like, oh, we're out of Greek yogurt? Could you imagine if I was like, well, my whole week is off because I don't have Greek yogurt and that's a pillar of my meal plan?
Yeah. Or now you got to go out to the store just for that. Maybe it's late at night. You're like, my last meal needs Greek yogurt. And now you're like, oh, I got to go all the way to the store. Your
Yeah.
partner's like, what the heck are you doing? We're trying to sit down and watch TV. We
Yeah.
watch the Leafs game, whatever. And then, and then you're like, I got to go get my Greek yogurt. And he's like, what the heck?
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like, that's just another form of handcuffs and dependency. It's like, it's
Mm.
not a practical way to live versus, you know what? I got other things. I got skills. I know how to adapt so that even if I love Greek yogurt and I usually have it every night, maybe I do something different for the next 3 days
Yeah.
and then I go back to that after, right?
Yeah.
But it's not like those 3 days become a goner or I have to panic and do everything now.
No, exactly.
No,
Exactly. So,
Yeah. To quickly summarize what we've just covered off, I'm going to rapid fire off the key practical challenges with meal plans that make them hard to adhere to in the long term, but also sometimes in the short term, and why they just are not the key to success for long term results in your fitness journey, both from a weight loss goal perspective or weight maintenance or any of that. So I'm going to quickly fire off what we've talked about so far.
let's do it.
Do you want to go back and forth or you want me to just list them?
No, you just go for
Okay.
it.
So, 1, lack of variety, nutrient deficiencies. 2, real life is not that rigid. What happens when you have different events, you're in a different environment, etc. 3, we've talked about the all or nothing thinking, right? And how you start to fall into this like dichotomous, it's I'm either entirely on or entirely off, and how that doesn't allow you to make incremental progress.
Mm-hmm.
There's no skill building or autonomy built into it, so it creates a sense of dependency that doesn't really allow you to really build the strategies that you need for you to have self-efficacy in your journey. Is that everything?
I think so.
So that's everything that we talked about. Before we wrap things up for today, we're going to quickly discuss 2 more topics on this. One is, what do you do instead of a meal plan? And then the last one is, when do meal plans actually have a use case? Do you want to do those in reverse order or in that order?
No, yeah, I'll do first, like, when do they have a use case, okay? And then we'll talk about some practical things. And I kind of gave a hint of what I do. I think meal plans can be useful if you already have the knowledge that surrounding nutritional principles and all these things. Like, you already have that stuff developed. You've done the tracking before. You know how to do it. And then you're trying to kickstart momentum in a new phase. I do think there is something benefit, and I will do something similar to this, like for my next fat loss phase. Is like I'll kind of build myself my own meal plan, but it's using the knowledge and skills that I have, and also knowing that those options are rotatable.
And also knowing that like it's serving you a purpose. Like if you're kickstarting, it's like, here's my foundation, I'm going to go. But you also have a game plan for what happens after.
Yes.
Or how that foundation evolves. And that's the difference, right? It's not meant to be only this applies for the foreseeable future.
No, it's just generating momentum.
Exactly.
Right off the bat.
So I really like that application. I think that's a great application.
Yeah. The next one, I do think towards the very end of a competition prep, when you're trying to keep as many variables as possible the same, when you're in the nitty gritty stages where everything kind of makes a little bit of a difference, getting to very low levels of body fat, and then also you're about to peak your physique, I do think you want to be very consistent with your foods. And most of the times competitors at that point end up just pretty much being on a meal plan anyways by building it. Like they just follow the routine so strictly.
You don't want decision fatigue. You don't want stress too, right? So those benefits that we talked about up front is like, that's a great application for them.
Yeah. So maybe you know, the last 3 weeks you are just following kind of a meal plan, and then, you know, going to peak week, you kind of vary some things and increase quantities or decrease quantities or swap foods, you know, like, but that could be another use case. I don't know if you have any other ones.
Honestly, I think those are the 2 that I would support. I think this kind of leads us into like what to do instead. Right. And you mentioned this up front, just the idea of a sample day of eating. But I think that even the language matters here, because sample day of eating implies that it is one out of multiple possibilities. It is not the only or exclusive possibility. Whereas meal plan is like, this is the plan. And you know what? Hey guys, plans change, right? So the sample day of eating becomes the quote unquote use case for meal plans, but it's not actually a meal plan. And I know we've both done this with some of our clients before. What it is it's a template or it's a
Yes.
guideline of like, hey, here's an example. And usually when we draft these, we don't just pull them out of thin air and give them to someone. We actually work with them to be like, what are some of your favorite foods?
Yeah.
How many times a day do you usually eat?
Exactly.
Like what are the typical structure of your meals? Or like, do you have specific times a day when you work out so we can consider pre and post workout nutrition needs? Also 2 episodes we've recently done. So, it's carefully curated sample day of eating that takes that person as an individual into consideration. And then it's positioned to them as here's an example day, which can help them have a starting template. And that can be really helpful for people who are new on their nutrition journeys to
Yes.
actually learn, oh, this
Just
is
see
what
what it
it
looks
looks
like. Yeah.
this is what it looks like, and then practice that. It gives them something to practice. And something I personally like to do when I use that strategy is also outline the nutritional like breakdown or
Yeah.
composition of all the foods that are in there, so they can also be like, oh, this is what 25 grams of protein actually looks like on my plate.
Yeah,
So
it can fast track you up that learning curve.
exactly, and then a sample day of eating becomes a learning tool with the intention of skills development and practice, while still taking advantage of some of those benefits of like consistency or minimizing decision fatigue. But then the positioning and the application of it are so different than a meal plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I like it.
Yeah. Any other things that you can do instead? Like we talked about the sample day of eating, but
I think it's kind of breaking down what I mentioned before of how I set things up. It's like I know roughly how many meals I want to eat per day. I know roughly the types of meals I want to have. I know roughly like the macro and calorie content per meal that I want to have, and then like how I want to space it out given my training, where my training falls, and etc. And given the phase that I'm in, and then from there you kind of like make your way down to you kind of create that structure, and then having that giving yourself that ability to rotate things out and based on preference, based on what groceries you got, based on lifestyle. And then when you go out to eat for dinner, you have your systems and strategies, which I think we've done another episode on that, or maybe we're going to do.
I think it's on the list.
It's on the list. So you create some strategies so that in those situations you're not lost because you have the ability to navigate those situations.
Right. Love that. So what you just did is essentially broke down how a meal plan should be set up anyways, if it's done effectively.
Yeah.
But now you can do it in a way that's flexible based on your day-to-day, right? So if you answer those questions that you just said, so anyone listening, if you're trying to figure out, okay, what do I do instead of a meal plan? Think about what a meal plan offers you. It tells you how many times a day to eat. It tells you what foods, and it tells you like how those foods are spread out throughout the day, those sorts of things. You need to answer that for yourself, and then that can change. The answer to those questions can change from day to day.
Yeah, and it will. Yeah.
And it will change from day to day. And when you're on a meal plan, the fact that it will change is why that meal plan becomes so hard to follow. But if you yourself know each day, you can kind of, I don't know, if I think about how I actually go about my day, I almost build myself a meal plan for each individual day. I mean, that sounds like a lot of work, but I mean, it's really just being like, okay, what's today going to look like? How many times am I going to eat? When do I need the majority of my food intake? How am I going to hit my protein goal? And you plan each day like that. And yes, you can turn a single day into a template and follow that for multiple days in a row. We've got some clients, shout out Taz, she does a great job of being like, okay, this week, here are my meals. I'm going to have this on the days I'm in the office. These are what my days are going to look like when I'm at home.
And I think that's great to do that. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's the meal preparation and the meal planning skill that allows her to be successful. So that still applies. But then the difference is like when days look different, you build your own version of that, what that day needs to look like.
Exactly.
Cool. Amazing.
Sweet.
So
good chat.
Great chat. Back up to our question. Are meal plans the best way to lose weight? Do you have any concluding thoughts on that?
Still no.
Still no. Still no. So not only are they not the best way, there is no best way to lose weight. When we're comparing meal plans and flexible dieting, both strategies can drive equivalent short-term success when adhered to. However, meal plans become very, 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 very difficult to adhere to in both the short and long term for all of the reasons that we've talked about today. So this is why we personally, the two of us and Truth Body Systems, do not advocate for meal plans and do not prescribe meal plans, in addition to the fact that we're not registered dietitians. But hopefully this left you thinking about how you can find success with your daily nutrition needs, or realizing why meal plans might not have worked for you in the past. If you have experience with meal plans, positive, negative, somewhere in between, we'd love to hear what that's looked like for you, how you've used them, what you've learned from them, what strategies you might be using now, please drop a comment below and share them with us. And please don't forget as well, while you're in the comments, like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes of Truth Talks, like the one we'll probably do on how to go out to eat, which we know is a definite barrier to meal plan success.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for listening. Have a great week ahead. Without further ado, we'll be back in your feeds with another episode of Truth Talks next Monday. Bye for now.